Good afternoon. Welcome to the GMC April membership meeting. It's hard to believe it's already April. Amazing. I'm Greg Marcus, chair of the GMC and president and CEO of the Marcus Corporation. As we move into a new year of membership meetings, we want to ensure we are sharing the COVID innovations our members have experienced over the past year. For today's meeting, we've invited Governor Tommy Thompson, interim president of UW System, to talk about the innovations the system has experienced during the pandemic. It is rumored that Governor Thompson has created over 50 new initiatives since joining the system just last summer, ranging from fresh water to prison reform to student resources. We look forward to hearing from Governor Thompson later in the program, but first, I invite Julia Taylor to share GMC Initiative Updates. To begin today's meeting, go ahead, Julia.
Thank you, Greg. Hello and welcome to our April meeting. For today's update, I want to focus on two of our impact areas on racial equity and a few key updates. We and our community partners are building equity along the Beer Line Trail. The Beer Line and the North Railroad lines literally carried Milwaukee's products and economic power until the late 70s. Harambe's African-American community grew up around the many industries and the jobs that relied on those railroad lines. After the 70s, over 75,000 jobs were lost along the Beer Line Trail as factories moved or closed. John Schmidt, a reporter with the Journal Sentinel, in a series called A Dream Derailed, wrote, "No other African-American community worked as intensively at manufacturing products that are no longer made here or was less prepared for a historic shift from unskilled labor. In little more than a generation, Milwaukee has morphed from one of the highest income levels in the country for African Americans to a locus of downward mobility without equal among other big US cities. The result is a depression in the region's urban core far more severe than the Great Depression of the 1930s. Our Beer Line Trail project is a community investment to sustain and enrich the lives of people in Harambe, a neighborhood that's been impacted by decades of disinvestment. Residents helped to create the equitable implementation plan, which ensures that the next phases of trail development are community focused and that other development inspired and centered around the trail benefits adjacent residents and businesses equitably. We invite you to learn more about the trail. I want to thank Kevin Long from Quarles and Brady, who's looking at holding their team development session on the trail. There's a lot of opportunities to engage GMC members in this work and learn more about the community and the trail. And we're also launching the feasibility study. So if you are contacted, please do me a favor and take the time to participate. Our newly created Business Leader Vaccine Advisory Committee has launched, and we're ensuring equitable access to the vaccines will be important to mitigate the disproportionate impacts of the pandemic for Black and Hispanic populations, which are widening disparities going forward, and try to achieve broad population immunity. Thank you to everyone who responded to the letter from Greg Marcus asking for your support of the regional goal to vaccinate 80% of the adult population by summer. You may have seen in the media the $1 million campaign ad launched by VICOM, a local collaborative effort sharing accurate communications about the efficacy and the safety of the vaccine, especially with Black and Hispanic communities. Your support helps advance this work through public ads that VICOM launches today and the lone talent that can help facilitate the work. We're hopeful that this will be a short-lived task as vaccine numbers continue to grow, both in supply and demand. And also watch for our weekly infographic on vaccine resources in the newsletter that includes information you can share with your employees. We are constantly updating resource information on our website, including the just released information on employer-based clinics. Visit healthymke.com to find out where to get your vaccine, and we will be sharing specific employer information on reopening plans later this month. And I now invite Dr. Raymond, President and CEO of the Medical College of Wisconsin and a co-chair of our vaccine task force, to share a COVID-19 update. Dr. Raymond?
Thanks, Julia, and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks to the GMC for always focusing on what matters to our community. So thank you. If I go to the next slide, please. Just going to start with some numbers. We are trending in the wrong direction. So I'll start with that, although it doesn't look like we're having a surge right now. So we had 569 positive new cases in Wisconsin yesterday, And remember, Sundays tend to be light reporting days. Same thing, we've been over 100 in Milwaukee now for a couple of weeks, 138 yesterday. Our case positivity is too high and it's trending higher, so that's unfavorable, both in Wisconsin and in Milwaukee, and you can see the percentages there. We'd like for those to be under 5%. Just in terms of the numbers, we've had over 500,000 cases in Wisconsin. We just passed 100,000 here in Milwaukee. And we're nowhere near our peak day where we almost had 8,000 cases on November 18th for the state of Wisconsin and 1,649 here on the 9th of November. So even if we have a fourth surge here, I do not believe that it's going to be as severe as what we had in November, but we're still trending in the wrong direction. Next slide, please. Cumulative deaths, obviously too many, 6,677 in Wisconsin. And as we've discussed before, a slight male predisposition and a disproportionate impact on people and communities of color. And we single out Black, African American, Hispanic, and Latinx communities, but also Indigenous, North American, and Pacific and Asian Islanders and Hmong populations also do suffer disproportionate burdens of disease and poor outcomes. Similar trends here in Milwaukee, and I'll point out that these are clinically and laboratory diagnosed COVID cases. These are not medical examiner cases. Those numbers tend to be a little bit lower, but you can see the trends are very much the same. Next slide, please. Now, just some key takeaways. Wisconsin is doing better now than we did during the first three surges. And looking back in retrospect, the spring and summer surges were hardly surges, but the November surge was real. At one point, we were the epicenter of COVID-19 in the country, and we came perilously close to overwhelming the capacity of our health systems to render the best care to everyone. But, as I pointed out earlier, the cases and hospitalizations are beginning to rise, and they've been trending upward for the last 2 weeks. Our cases now are averaging, that's a 7-day average, of 775 per day, and that's up from our recent 7-day average low of 363 a month ago on March 11th. And hospitalizations also are up 49% since our all-time low of 193 was reported on March 21st. Now, this isn't that different than the US in aggregate. The 7-day average for US daily new cases has risen from under 5,000 in mid-March to 68,000 yesterday. And recall, that's a rolling 7-day average. However, and very fortunately, the deaths are still trending downward. But please remember, deaths lag cases by 4 to 6 weeks. Now, the state trends are quite variable. As we all know, there's a severe surge in Michigan and surges in New York and New Jersey that appear to be plateauing. Minnesota cases are continuing to rise. I hesitate to call it a surge, but there has been a significant uptick in cases for the last 3 to 4 weeks in Minnesota, with no evidence that that is slowing down. Illinois cases also have increased 50% over the last 2 weeks, and deaths are rising in Minnesota and in Michigan, which again have had surges for longer than some of the other states. So again, I want to point out, as I did at last month's meeting, COVID-19 doesn't respect state boundaries or county lines, and we're not on an island here in Wisconsin. So to have states around us surging like Minnesota and Michigan, or beginning to surge like Illinois, should be a warning sign for us. And so we're at an inflection point of competing forces. On the one hand, we're doing quite well with increasing COVID-19 vaccinations in our country, and especially here in Wisconsin, versus pandemic fatigue and the more contagious variant strains, which I'm going to talk about in the next slides. So next slide, please. So we are doing well in Wisconsin in terms of vaccine distribution and administration, despite some hiccups and some hand-wringing in mid to late December and early January. We are best in class in many ways. We're 10th of 55 US states and territories for administration of a single dose or completed courses to our population. And you can see at the screenshot from the DHS website on the right side of the slide that we have given at least one dose to 37.3% of our population. And that's a remarkable achievement when you consider the 20% of the population, in other words, our folks that are under 16 years old, are not eligible right now. And as a country, we're doing well also. 1 in 3 people in the US have received at least one vaccination dose. And as most of us know, Milwaukee has been lagging in terms of vaccine administration compared to the rest of the state, but we actually are catching up quite dramatically. And I think we will be all caught up with the rest of the state, hopefully within the next few weeks to a month. The USA also is ramping up. We're over 3 million shots per day on average, and Wisconsin's ramping up, and we nearly hit 400,000 doses administered last week. And as the DHS said back in February, if we simply had enough doses, we could vaccinate the entire eligible population in Wisconsin by May. And we have stood up an outstanding infrastructure to administer the vaccines, and we're ready to go. We just need that supply to increase. And I anticipate, like many of the rest of you probably do, that by sometime in mid-May, the demand is not, or the supply is going to exceed the demand for vaccinations. So this effort that Julia talked about to instill vaccine confidence in populations that are questioning the efficacy and safety of the vaccines is really, really critical. Next slide, please. Most of you already know this, but there are 3 vaccines that are on the market in the US right now, all authorized under the emergency use authorization by the FDA. 2 messenger RNA vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna. These have proven to be incredibly effective and very safe. And a more traditional Johnson & Johnson approach, which uses an attenuated cold virus to introduce the snippet of RNA from the virus and induce an antigen response. Again, these are very, very safe vaccines. We now have almost 200 million doses that have been administered in the US and over 100 million people that have been vaccinated with only minor side effects and strong efficacy. Although no immunity is perfect, we're all aware of breakthrough infections that are happening, in particular with some of the new variant strains. And so that bears watching by all of us. And it's the reason why we continue to say, despite being fully vaccinated, that we're asking people to practice good pulmonary hygiene, to mask, to maintain social distancing, and to minimize non-essential interactions. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're doing very well. Actually, as a world, we're doing well. As of yesterday, more than 773 million COVID-19 vaccine doses had been administered, and the US is first in the world for total vaccinations, 183.5 million doses administered. And we have a higher percentage of individuals who've completed the series in the US, 21%, than much of the rest of the world, but we are behind some smaller countries. You can see Israel, Seychelles, Chile, Bahrain, and Monaco. Wisconsin also has a higher percentage of individuals who've received at least one vaccine dose, 37.3, than much of the rest of the country, and we're on par with neighboring states. We also, as I mentioned, are in the top 10 for completion of the course, and we were at 24.3% of our population who completed their course as of yesterday. And as we mentioned, the 3 authorized vaccines in the USA are highly effective, and the differences in the reported efficacy can't really be directly compared to each other, and for all practical purposes are inconsequential. And the real reason for that is the things that matter, reducing hospitalizations, reducing severe symptomatic disease, and reducing deaths, are essentially not different for the Johnson & Johnson Janssen, the Pfizer, and the Moderna BioNTech vaccines. These are all terrific vaccines. We do expect Novavax to request emergency use authorization in the US sometime in late April or early May, and possibly AstraZeneca, although it certainly has some PR issues and some questions both about its efficacy against the South African strain and safety for relatively rare clotting disorders. Next slide, please. As you can see, the DHS has updated the website, and all of you know that individuals 16 and older in Wisconsin are all eligible to receive a COVID-19 vaccination. Children between the ages of 16 and 18 require parental consent, though. Next slide, please. And Yeah, one thing I do want to mention, I do expect a rapid approval of Pfizer's request for an expansion of their EUA to include adolescents 12 to 15 years old. And I expect that Johnson & Johnson and Moderna will follow quickly. So that's another chunk of our population that will be eligible for vaccination, hopefully as early as the next week or the week after that. So when can we open back up? These are Raymond's 3 criteria. First of all, we all know about herd immunity, and that's anywhere between 70 and 90% of adults and children. So it needs to be the whole population. We're not sure where that's going to end up, but it's a significant number. And if you think about it, if 20% of our population are kids who are not eligible, and we have large groups of individuals with vaccine hesitancy, especially Black and brown populations, and young male Republicans, we've got some work to do if we want to get jabs in arms. But it's more than getting jabs in arms. The burden of disease has to be considered low, not just by DHS, but I would argue that the entire country of the United States. And as of last Wednesday, no counties in Wisconsin had low activity levels. And again, that's somewhat of an unfavorable trend compared to where we were 2 to 3 weeks ago. We have 10 counties with medium activity, 61 with high levels, and 1 that had very high levels. And I think this is the first time in the last 5 weeks that any of our counties had very high levels of activity. And we also need the third criteria is we really need to know more about the effectiveness of the vaccines for the new strains and how well previous infections prevent reinfection. So I'm going to talk about 4 strains here. The Brazilian P1 strain is of concern for reinfection, and we're seeing a huge surge in Brazil with people that are getting very, very sick from the P1 strain, even though they had documented infections earlier with the wild type virus. The South African or the B1351 strain is of concern for vaccine ineffectiveness. So it's showing signs of starting to escape the immunity that people receive both from previous infections and from some of the vaccines. And the largest concern is with the AstraZeneca vaccine. But I do want to point out that the 3 vaccines on the market in the US still give a robust immune response, even to the B1351 strain. So everyone should get vaccinated because there's going to be some protection. We have had 4 cases of P1 detected in Wisconsin and 15 cases of B1351. So those are the Brazil and the South African strains. 148 cases of the UK B1.17 strain, which we know is more contagious and causes more severe disease and increases the risk of death. Now, interestingly, we thought that would be the predominant strain in Wisconsin by around this time. And what I would want to point out is half of the cases that are sequenced now are a variant here in Wisconsin. But surprisingly, the most commonly detected variant is the California strain, or the B1427 or B1429 strain. This is the first time I've talked about the California strain. There's a growing awareness and concern about this strain. This strain was probably driving the surge that California experienced in February and March, and very likely causes more significant disease, including deaths, hospitalizations, and ICU utilization that we saw during that 4th surge in California. Now, the CDC actually has come out with some new classifications for us to think about variants, and those are shown on the right-hand side of the slide. There are 3 levels of interest in these variants. So variants of interest would be mutations of specific regions of the COVID-19 virus that would be predicted to alter the biology of the virus, perhaps make it more contagious or more lethal. And those would typically be in small, select regions of the spike protein. Variants of concern are the next level, and that would include evidence of increased transmission or virulence or escape from immunity. And all of the 4 variants that I discussed have some degree of one of those, evidence of increased transmission, virulence, or escape from immunity. So they're characterized as variants of concern. Variants of consequence would be variants that had clear evidence that preventive measures or treatment measures are ineffective. And so far, fortunately, none of the variants have reached that level. The next slide, please. So again, let's continue to be safe. Anybody who's been fully vaccinated We don't know the impact of the variants. We also know that young people are getting COVID-19, they're spreading it, and they're getting very sick. And we have a large percentage of them that are not vaccinated. So we need to do our best to protect each other. And next slide, please. And these are the data sources that we use for the presentations. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Julia and Greg.
Thank you, Dr. Raymond, for sharing another insightful COVID update. You and the entirety of the medical college has been a strong resource for all things COVID and vaccine related. And personally, I want to thank you. I know you've been working tirelessly for over a year now on this and helping guide our community. And it speaks to, it speaks to why healthcare in southeastern Wisconsin is one of our crown jewels. And you see it, the results of the vaccination. It's because probably we were all wringing our hands and got ahead of it. And that's really why we're trying to get ahead of what's about to happen when we flip from a supply constraint to really will be a demand constraint. As we start to see supply exceeding demand, and we start to get to those populations that are lacking confidence. And that's why we've got our committee, and why we're asking you, and I'll make that a pitch, as did Julia, for reviewing that letter that we sent out that asks for financial assistance. And also we need people in certain areas to help with the effort as well, because it's going to get really important. And it may not seem like it right this second, but they say it takes 6 times you have to hear a message 6 times to get through to anybody. That's an old marketing axiom. And so we need to get that message out and have it repeated. And I appreciate all the work you do, Dr. Raymond. So thank you. Now I invite Dr. Mark Mone, Chancellor of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, to introduce today's keynote speaker. Dr.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Greg. Good to see you. And it's always wonderful to share any stage with Dr. John Raymond. And I just want to echo what, Greg, you've said about the medical college's work, and John, your leadership and really helping us in so many different ways. And I think to Julia Taylor's great leadership, this is just another example of the great work that GMC is doing around learning, collaboration, advocacy, making a huge difference for those things that matter. So wonderful shout outs to all of you. It is my pleasure to introduce my boss, Governor Tommy Thompson, who's the interim president of the University of Wisconsin system. He can eloquently and easily speak to all the themes that I've just mentioned around collaboration, education, advocacy. And I think that you all know he was appointed in his role in June of last year, but he's accomplished so much you'd think it's been 5 years. He's really put us on a great pace. He's accomplished an awful lot, and you're going to hear today about many important initiatives and the roles that all of us can play in terms of helping the UW system help solve a lot of issues that are happening in the state. That's one of the key themes that Governor Thompson talks about all the time, the new Wisconsin idea. And I don't want to steal any of his thunder, because I know he's going to speak very effectively to these areas. There is a lot at stake, though. This isn't what we oftentimes might refer to as academic. This is quite practical. This is quite real. If you had asked me a year ago if the University of Wisconsin system would be administering 50% of the tests, and today being a key force in vaccinations, I would have said that's not our purview, that's not our role. But Governor Thompson's leadership has shown the way, and we're in an incredible position today to really solve and help save lives because of that. Beyond that, though, he's driving a number of things that are important for the Milwaukee area and really all campuses across the UW system that strengthen the state. You'll hear about many of the budget initiatives that are important given the challenges that we see in this region in our panel discussion later today around particularly students of color and the types of initiatives around affordability and promise programs and expansion of a number of things. These are front and center for Governor Thompson. So as I think about this, the other aspect that many of you probably know, but not everybody knows about the absolutely remarkable and legendary advocate that we have for the state of Wisconsin with Governor Thompson. You may know that he was the only governor to have been elected 4 times, served for 18 years as the governor of the state. He also was Secretary of Health and Human Services for the Bush administration, and he's also the former Wisconsin Assembly Minority Leader. He is truly committed to not only a strong University of Wisconsin system, but the state overall. You will not find a greater cheerleader, a greater champion for so many things. So with that, I welcome Governor Tommy Thompson. Tommy.
Boy, Mark, after that, I think I'll just sit down and say amen and leave it at that. I'll tell you, thank you, Mark. Mark Mone is one of the outstanding chancellors that we have in our system. And I say that not being obsequious at all. He is outstanding. He suffered some cancer this year, but worked right through it. I can't tell you the energy, the ability, and the articulation that Mark Mone has been able to give this university system. He's outstanding. We're absolutely delighted to have him as Chancellor of Milwaukee. And nobody is more dedicated to his or her campus than Mark Mone is to Milwaukee. He loves the campus like I do. And we want Milwaukee to grow. We want Milwaukee to be bigger and better and stronger than it's ever been. And that is a cooperative issue that both Mark and I share. And we are going to do everything in our powers to make that happen. I want to thank Greg Marcus, Dr. John Raymond, Julie Taylor, Danae Davis. I see her picture up here. Dr. Eve Hall, who's on the Board of Regents. I always have a pleasure to see her and everybody else that's on the Greater Milwaukee Committee. I've had so many wonderful involvements with the Greater Milwaukee Committee over the years, and I always look forward to having an opportunity to address you, to answer your questions, just to be involved with you, because the Greater Milwaukee Committee is a committee that is set up for one purpose, and that purpose is to make Milwaukee better. And you've done that, and the kind of strength and the growth and the development that's happening in Milwaukee makes all of us very, very proud. University of Wisconsin system, as I've said many times, and will say it till the day I walk out of this office, is the second biggest asset we have in the state. The people are, of course, are the number one asset we have in our state. But the University of Wisconsin system is just an outstanding system. And I don't think many people understand the system. I don't think you understand how big it is and how good it is and how important it is. For instance, we have about 170,000 students every year coming into our campus. Even with pandemic, we were able to pretty much to meet our enrollment levels. And I think this year, starting up this fall, we're going to even do better, because I've directed that all the campuses are going to be open 75% of the time, in-person classes, and the other 25% are going to be distance learning, and also be able to utilize our tremendous IT capabilities on our campus. We graduate about 37,000 students, and of those 37,000, 90%, I want you to remember this, 90% of the students stay in the state of Wisconsin for 5 years. Now they're the future, they're the growth of our state. This morning I was out at the engineering school on Madison campus because we're trying to build a new engineering school. We have 5,500 engineers going through that particular college today. We don't have the space. We have so many more students that want to come in. And of the 900 graduates out of the engineering school, we have 10,000 job requests. Just think of that, 10,000 job requests. And those engineers are going to be staying in Wisconsin. And we only can graduate 900. We need to double the engineering school. And we're asking the legislature to give us the money. And these are the kind of things I'm going to be talking about throughout my short speech. And hopefully you will ask questions. This is where the Greater Milwaukee Committee can be extremely helpful. We have some building projects on the UW-Milwaukee. And we're redoing one of the halls, and we got another office building that should be on the agenda. Didn't quite make it, but doesn't mean that we cannot try. And Mark Mone knows how important these building projects are, and will be reaching out to you as I will be, asking you to come in and get involved. I want you to be involved in your university, because we're growing, we're expanding. And as I've told everybody, the new Wisconsin idea, which is not only to graduate and educate as many people as we can at all corners of this state, and to serve all people in all corners of the state. But at the same time, I want us to add, I want to up that just a little bit by saying, where there's a problem, we want to be there. We want We want the Greater Milwaukee Committee, when you got a problem with your businesses or with your committee or whatever, I want you to call the university. I want you to call Mark Mone. I want you to call Tommy Thompson. I want you to call Becky Black at the Madison. I want you to ask us for help. And that's what we've been able to do. When there was the pandemic hit us, and I know Dr. John Raymond was talking about that earlier, and thank you for your leadership in that, John. But when we were faced with this problem, I made the decision, not all chances were in agreement, that we were going to open up. When we made the decision, we opened up on September 3rd, and I knew as president, I had to make sure that the campuses were going to be safe. And so what I did is I set up a testing program, and I think it was probably the best testing program for colleges any place in the country. It was evidenced by the fact that the federal government recognized us and gave us some additional money so we could expand our testing, not only on our campuses, but also, ladies and gentlemen, to go into the communities. The federal government asked us if we could do that. We did it, and we did it very effectively. And we have done over 1 million tests in the state of Wisconsin from your university system. All these universities, Mark Mone has been a true leader in helping to set it up, and we've been just great with the kind of input that we got in Milwaukee. And then after that, I made the decision that I wanted us to go into vaccination, because the second thing in the Wisconsin idea is to serve and educate. The second part that I want people to understand is we're here to solve problems. You got a problem, call us. And so a big problem was vaccination. And we came in and we got vaccination now on 8 campuses, and we're going to expand that even more. We're vaccinating people every single day on our campuses. And the nice thing about it is I knew that we were having a shortage when we had the terrible epidemic in December, and the hospitals were strained and the nursing homes were assisted livings. So I asked my nursing deans to get involved. Every single one of them said, absolutely. And they brought their nursing students in, and we're giving the nursing students a reduction on their tuition to come out and volunteer and be employed by hospitals and nursing homes. And then on top of it, they're doing the vaccinations. You go to the Milwaukee campus, you'll see 5 or 6, 7, 8, or 9 nursing students there giving you the vaccine, vaccinating you. And what better training? What better thing for the university to do? Solving problems. So that's what we're doing. We're out there on the front lines, and we want to do it. And then, of course, I looked at the situation with our high schools, and know that our seniors are going to have a tough time, fitting into college, because they haven't had the social interaction, they haven't had the in-person teaching that is necessary to get them ready. So what we're doing, and once again, I called upon and came up with the idea, and I talked to Mark Mone. He said, I'll chair it, Tommy. I'll set it up. Mark always, when I need something, Mark is always front and center and always volunteers first, which I love. And we set up a program, so it's called the Bridge Program. And we're inviting in 1,400 to 1,500 seniors to come to our campus, spend some time. And I'm asking our educators, our teaching students who probably didn't get a chance to do their student teaching this past spring, to help out these seniors, come in and keep them remedial learning and teaching and whatever the course may be, and help them along and get them acclimated to the campus and show them that it's not that scary, that we're there to help. And we're going to be setting up programs to help students come in, because I want the new university to be, what is the best for the student? How do we get the students better educated, better acclimated, and give them a better educational journey through our university system? That's all working. And on top of that, we got problems. The problems are that, I'll give you a few of them. Our problems is that our infrastructure at running a business is really bad. And we've changed the payroll. We had 4 different types of payrolls. I've changed that to 1. We're going to be starting in July 1st. Everybody's going to be paid every other week and based just the same way as the state. saves us money, makes it more efficient. People get their money faster. Second thing is we had a payment system was set up just with payment cards. We had over 7,000, I think close to 8,000 payment cards. Pretty hard to figure out what they were being spent on. There was very little supervision. And we're going to have a new procurement to payment system. It's going to be second to none. That's going to be kicked off on April 16th. Third, we're going to completely do our computer system, which is so archaic and arcane that we have to get a whole new system and get it into the cloud so that we can run like a big business, because we are big. We're a $6 billion operation, 170,000 students, 40,000 employees. And I want us to be modern. I want us to be innovative. I want us to be on the cutting edge. And that's what we're going to do before I get out of here, hopefully. And hopefully we can get that all done. And then, of course, we put together a budget with 10 initiatives. And some of them are, I think, are really far-reaching, like turning one of our prisons into a college. And Mark Mone, once again, I hate to keep talking about him, but I have to because he's so darn good, is to turn one of our prisons into a college. You ever think of that? Matriculate through the system so that, and I want you employers out there listening, I want you to help me set up the curriculum, and I want you to sponsor some students, prisoners, and so that when they walk out, they're going to have a job. Because if we don't, the rate of recidivism is so high in Wisconsin, in which these young men and women go back into prison, it costs us $35,000 a year to keep them incarcerated. I want them, once they get through, matriculate, I want to get them a graduation, and then I want you, the employer, to hire them. And I want you to help me set up the curriculum and sponsor them throughout this journey so they know that XYZ Corporation, the Marcus Corporation, has got a job for them. And the Marcus Corporation is going to be there and help us set up the kind of training and walk out. The next thing is that we've already set up 30 new agricultural agents so that we can help the farmers at every county, every hamlet in this state. And that's going through the legislature right now. And everybody, it's a bipartisan support. And the third thing is, which is a big one for Milwaukee, is our water initiative. You have so many businesses around the city of Milwaukee that are really keyed into the water industry and the water sources we have in this great state. And Milwaukee is going to lead this initiative, and we got to get it passed. And I need your help to do it. And we have a fantastic doctor who's running it, Dr. Jablonski, Marisa Jablonski, who is outstanding. And she's going to be coming in and talking to you because I've asked her to do that. And she's talking to several different employers. We're going to set up apprenticeships. It's going to be wonderful. And we're raising money, of course. I think we got enough money for the new boat. And we want this to be thing. This could be the whole country, the world can look at Milwaukee as being the center of water initiative and water research. And then you go up to Green Bay, you go to Stevens Point, you go to Superior, you go to on the Mississippi with La Crosse. We can become the water capital of the world. I get a little excited because I'm excited about the possibilities, making Wisconsin the best. You know me, I hate to lose on anything. And so we have 10 of these initiatives. I can go into all of them, but I don't have enough time to. But these are just 3 of the big ones that we have. And of course, distance learning. We have 815,000 people that have started college and have not finished. And I want to go after those 815,000, get them back in either in vocational education or into our college system and get them a degree or get them a certified so they can help in the business and grow this great economy. Our economy, we're about a $23 billion operation. And we return, ladies and gentlemen, $23 for every dollar we get. Now, I'm going to tell you something you probably don't know. You probably think you know the state of Wisconsin is a very big contributor. Don't think I'm in any way argumentative or reduce or talking down or dissing them at all. I love what the state does to us, but it's only 17%. 17%, and we return $23 for every dollar we get. Now that's a great rate of return. an ROI that you can't complain about, 23-1. And what I'm telling people, and I'll tell you, and since Greg, you were running this, I'll tell you, if I came up to you and I said, Greg, I know your father, so I know what your answer is going to be. If you give me 17 cents, I'll give you 83 cents back. How often would you do that during the day? You probably would do it as often as you can reach in your pocket and pick up 17 cents because it's a great rate of return. That's what I'm telling you about Wisconsin and this great university system. We get about 17% from the state of Wisconsin, but we're returning 23 billion in our research. We got two great research universities. All the universities are doing a great job in research, don't get me wrong, but we have two R1s, Milwaukee and Madison, and they have currently $1 billion worth of research going on, some on COVID, some on other diseases, some on water initiatives. Milwaukee's got several on water initiatives. These are the kinds of things that make Wisconsin a better state. And that's what this university is all about. So if I get a little excited about it, yeah, I am excited because I love this university system and I'm working my darndest to make it even better. So I'm modernizing it, making the systems better. We need more money. And then we, of course, need the initiatives, the 10 initiatives I have. We're moving forward. And that's what I like, moving forward and getting things done. The final thing I want to talk about is where I need your help as well. I've asked you on a lot of things from the criminal perspective to the water initiative, getting things through, getting the budget through, and realizing, that 17% is all we get. And if I give you 83 cents back, I would think the state would want to give us more money because we could do more with it. But our building program, most of our buildings, ladies and gentlemen, are in the 50s to 70s series. And that's the 19, most of the buildings took place. We have, as you probably read, the Van Heist, where my office was until this morning. I had to move out because it's unsafe. It's a 19-story building, second highest building in Wisconsin, next to the Capitol, one foot lower than the state Capitol, but the second tallest building. There's bricks falling off of it, but we have bricks falling off on the on the library. The Kaufman Center up in Green Bay, the Albertson Center up at, which is a dormitory in Stevens Point, because we haven't done much to defer. We've deferred the maintenance. We haven't done the maintenance or the repair. And 83% of the $1.7 billion that I'm asking for is for maintenance and repair and remodeling. We got to modernize this university. It's such a tremendous jewel, and it's going to return so much to the state of Wisconsin that we need to do it. I need your help because there's a lot of people in the legislature that don't want to give the university any more money, and they don't want to give us money for buildings because they say we don't know what the future is going to hold. Well, nobody does. But I know right now when you have buildings, and we have 3 of them right now with bricks falling off and could be very unsafe for students. We don't want an accident like we had at the parking garage down in Milwaukee, where that young man got crushed because he walked underneath it and it fell on top of him. And when the Van Heist cement fell off the other day, it was on a Sunday morning, nobody was around. But if in fact that would have happened in the afternoon, or any afternoon, it could have been deadly for a student or an employee. I don't want that to happen. So I need your help there. So ladies and gentlemen, when all said and done, you've got a great university system, one of the largest in the country, and we can make it bigger and better. And I need your help to do it. In the Greater Milwaukee Committee, there's not a better group of individuals to get involved with this university. And I want you involved. And if you are involved, you'll appreciate it and like what you see. And together we can make it even bigger and better. And with that, Greg, I'll turn it back to you. I can see Greg come on. When he gets on, means get off the stage. So I'm ready to hang up and answer your questions. Greg, go ahead.
Thank you, Governor Thompson, for that overview of the UW system. And you're right. I will cut that deal with you all day long. When I can invest 17 cents and get 83 back, that's like a 388% return. That's a winner. And when you characterize it as an investment versus just an expenditure,
it is.
That's the right way to do it, and that's what it is, as you said. So,
Greg, let me ask you a rhetorical question. If I did that, wouldn't you say, well, if I gave you 34 cents, would you double the 83? Right?
absolutely.
And that's what I'm saying. Give us the money. We're not spendthrifts. We're going to do what is right to grow Wisconsin. So thank you, Greg, for what you said.
Thank you. We thank you for your leadership. We know you are a leader who can create capacity and change, but the extent you've made within the system in such a short amount of time, my script says is truly remarkable. But I know you, and I'm not surprised in the slightest.
Thank you.
I
hate the status quo, Greg. I just hate it. And when I came in, I said, I'm not going to be a placeholder if you want me to come in here. And I turned it down a couple of times. I said, I'm going to make changes. And I'm making them every single day.
Great. Thank you. I invite our panelists to continue the conversation with Governor Thompson. We're going to be joined by Danae Davis, the Executive Director of Milwaukee Succeeds, Nancy Hernandez, President of the Hispanic Collaborative, Dr. Vicki Martin, President of MATC, and Dr. Mark Mone, Chancellor of UW-M. This panel will be moderated by Dr. Eve Hall, President and CEO of the Milwaukee Urban League and member of the UW Board of Regents.
Danae Davis, it's been a long time since I saw you. How are you?
Good to see you, Governor.
You still got the greatest smile. I want you to know that. It's so good to see you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Fire away. Eve, go ahead.
All right. So thank you, Greg, for your strong leadership, and Governor Thompson, I know your drive. So your relentless drive, your candor, your passion. You've never been settled with the status quo, because I worked in your administration. So I'm excited that you're at the helm. And for setting the tone for today's panel. So as we mentioned earlier, and all of us know, education is a significant factor to closing the wealth gap and increasing social mobility. However, the inequities continue to exist. And everybody on the panel, because I know all of you, Danae, Nancy, Vicki, Mark, we've all been at the forefront constantly fighting these inequities. But today what we want to do is actually have further discussion with you and with Governor Thompson with some prepared questions to just continue the conversation. We will have the conversation until approximately 1:14, and then at 1:14 we will open it up for Q&A. So let's start with this first question. Considering the constituency of students and talent you work with through your institution or your organization, how important is education to closing the gap and increasing social mobility? Something very easily that each of you can answer. So Danae, why don't we I see you raising your hand. Dr. Mone, go ahead and start.
Well, if you wanted to have, if nobody else was going to answer, I'll just jump in. I'm going to throw the number of 40 out for two reasons. First of all, 40% of our children live in poverty in this region. Second, the Hispanic Collaborative and Hispanic Professionals of Greater Milwaukee and the African American League, other groups have put together some really compelling data. Nancy knows this well. We have significant overrepresentation of individuals of color and lacking education in occupations over 40,000. And unfortunately, we have an underrepresentation, under 40,000, of individuals in careers that really will make a significant difference. We need to really look at these numbers and recognize education is probably the number one thing. If those individuals, if more people had 2-year, 4-year, and certificate degrees, we would have employment. And you talk about social mobility. Education is the pathway. It's home ownership. It's about job and income. It's about freedom from food insecurity and so many other things. So I think it's just absolutely foundational. And the wonderful thing is that on this panel today, there's so many leaders that are making a difference. And there's also many partners in the GMC that we're working with on those initiatives. So that's just kind of a quick opening comment on that.
Okay. Anyone else want to take that on?
I would certainly agree with Mark. And when I read that question, Dr. Hall, I said, duh, because there's only one right answer. But I want to embellish on why I believe that education is can be and should be the great equalizer. I'm looking at education as quality education in the eyes of our students from their vantage point with a purpose. I think that more and more today, we see all kinds of examples of what it takes to get to completion because the universities have figured that part out. In other words, they started in as early as middle school and worked their way through high school in terms of really engaging with kids and young people around why college gets them where they want to go, as opposed to the old days when I went to college because you're going to go to college because your parent told you that you were. Education with a purpose is the key to success, I believe. And when I say with a purpose, if you're engaging with our youth, then you're actually in a two-way relationship, and you're figuring out what about your systems in your institutions and organizations that support those institutions are really either the enhancers or the barriers. And if they're the barriers, you eliminate them. And if they're the enhancers, you actually put those resources necessary. So putting the students at the center and having a definition of quality that puts them in the center, I think is the great equalizer in terms of what it will take to get more of our Black and brown young people through and into careers.
Absolutely. Nancy, I see your hand up.
I just wanted to add and put a little more color on what Danae and Mark were talking about. So the Hispanic Collaborative, we try to have our pulse on Latino families and the community and what's happening. And to do that, we look a lot at data. And so looking at data, one thing we know is recovery from the Great Recession. If you did not have a college degree, it equals no recovery. So based on a Georgetown study of the 8.4 million jobs through 2016 that were created from that recovery, only 80,000 of them were high school graduate jobs. And that's a concern for our Latino population because Latinos are 20 percentage points behind the white adult population with a college degree. Our Hispanic Wellbeing Index can also show you several health and wealth statistics that stick with that gap. So addressing college disparity is essential to close other disparities in our community and improve economic mobility. It's important to me. Why should it be important to everybody in this room? Well, if you look at Steve Murdoch, who is a former US Census Bureau head and a researcher with Rice University, he estimates that if we, America, doesn't close that gap specifically for Latinos, that our median household income as a nation will go down by 5%. The reward, if we can close it, however, is that median household income will go up by $20,000 and a $15,000 increase in per capita income because of increases in consumer spending. So while in the past, if you looked at immigrant patterns, it was typically third generations that went to college. But the fact, according to Georgetown Center of Education and Workforce, is that our Hispanic population is so large and the gap so big, we cannot afford to wait that long. We need to send our current Latino, Black and brown students to college today.
Thank you, Nancy. Vicki, did you want to add anything, Dr. Martin?
Sure. I'll just add a little piece here about increasing the number of educated residents will benefit our entire state. And many of you know that Wisconsin established a goal called 60 Forward to ensure that 60% of our residents have a post-secondary credential so that we remain competitive in the US economy. And research demonstrated that if we took Milwaukee County and Racine County, and we just changed the elimination of the equity gap, if we just did that alone, we could move that needle and actually accomplish that goal for our whole state. And so when we look at social equity, we really need to make sure that education is at the front and center. And we must ensure that our programs lead to jobs with living wages. We must have a strong employer connection. We've got to have a strong transfer pipeline. And I know we have that with all of our four-year institutions, and in particular with UW-Milwaukee. And we have that virtual cycle of learning and earning. over and over again. And that's what's going to make it really important. I just need to say that in our region and for community colleges across this country, we are seeing a decline, especially in those first generation, our students of color, male students, first generation. Those are very concerning numbers, especially single parents. They are not coming back in the numbers that we really need to see, and we need to do something to turn that around.
Eve?
Right. Thank you. So, you know, we are always talking about how, yes, Governor Thompson.
Yeah, can I just, I don't know everybody knows how much the University of Wisconsin is doing right now, but, and we're not, don't think that I'm satisfied, because I'm not. But we set up we took some money and set up a Regent Scholarship this year for the first time, and Eve Howell was also instrumental in that. I also set up a program in some of our colleges to put people right in the high school to recruit minorities and also help educate them and keep them in class and go to school and tell them what studies they need. Number 3, we got an inclusive officer, Warren Anderson, the first time in central administration, or since I've been there, we just hired him. And we just put in an African-American chancellor at Stevens Point, and we got a possibility of another one in River Falls. What I'm telling you is Wisconsin's system is doing a lot. But what I need from you is I would like to see the Greater Milwaukee Committee and all of you have a day-long seminar and have us come down and let us see if we can work together and find out how we can get more students out of your organizations to come into our campuses. The problem is that we don't get enough, and we need people, Nancy and Danae and Vicki, we need people from your organizations to come and visit us and say, you know, they're pretty friendly guys. We'd like to have them stay. And that's what we need. We need more collaboration from you to get more Black and brown and also Native Americans. We've really failed on Native Americans in our society. And I want to make sure we try and do everything we possibly can to get more minorities on campus.
Thank you. Well, and I think the more we are intentional, you know, that's one of my favorite words, about pushing those numbers and collaborating, it can happen. So it's information on the front end, and then it's the responsibility of our campuses to continue to promote that climate that makes them feel welcome and to stay. So it is a two-way street. So, you know, one of the other things that's occurred, we keep saying that the pandemic brought to light some of the disparities, and really a lot of the disparities we already knew, but I think because the pandemic meant isolation and it meant so much self-reflection and really caused the country to stop and really face the truths of what was happening in this country. Issues like the digital divide, health disparities, racial justice, all of those really came to light even more. You know, as you think about that, what innovations have you realized and put in practice to overcome some of the inequities I just mentioned? But innovations that are really working, because we've been doing this a long time, but can you point to some innovations that you are doing where you're truly seeing impact and numbers?
So if I could just jump in there, as you know, Eve, Milwaukee Succeeds has had a commitment to eliminating disparities based on race and zip codes as part of our foundational model as a collective impact initiative. But what we've done of recent is to apply a targeted universalism practice, which says our focus is really going to be on Black male youth. And that is for all the obvious data reasons. Black males, not only in this city, in this state, but in this nation, but particularly persistently in this community, have been on the bottom rung on every measure of success. And so we, using data, have created an initiative called Youth Forward MKE. I'd invite any of our members of the GMC to visit our website, youthforwardmke.org, to learn more about this powerful initiative, which is focusing on the high school success of Black males in this community. The thing that makes it unique and innovative is, much like my previous comment and very much like some of the questions in the chat, this is an initiative that says we're starting with our youth to determine how they define success and what resources are necessary. They're at our table. We're shifting power, we're shifting resources, and we're shifting policy in their direction long-term. Right now, we've launched 2 initiatives. One is our ambassadors. You'll see their wonderful faces and their commitments on our website. There's 10 of them from various schools in Milwaukee who are learning leadership skills to then influence the Youth Forward MKE fellowship this summer that will involve 50 youth whose ideas were solicited in our Build Your Future campaign on what they say success would look like. And the number one theme that we heard was about careers and having what it takes to understand what their career path options are, and then to have those be the reason and way that they get to and through college and or into those careers directly. So the innovation is our young people are telling us, and we're going to respond accordingly. They're being paid for their service. They're not being treated as volunteers, because that's what we do all the time. We get focus groups and listening sessions, and we give people a free lunch and, you know, and maybe a gift card. These folks are actually gonna get paid. And many of you on this panel and also as members of the GMC are very much involved in our initiative. So again, it's not delivered the impact long-term that it will, but it has very much impacted the youth who have been engaged thus far.
Thank you, Danae, for sharing that. Nancy.
Thanks, Eve. And Danae, thanks again for shedding some more light on that program, because I think it's fantastic. And you know, I already think that you're a rock star. So thanks for sharing that. I want to share a little bit, you know, when you talk about digital divide, Eve, I think that there's a couple of ways we need to look at it. We need to look at the unconnected, right, which definitely is about 5%, at least, of Latino households here, but that's very important. We need to look at the underconnected. Everybody knows, or they might not know, you know, how do you do virtual learning from one smartphone, maybe with 3 different kids at home. But we also need to look at utilization and support of digital technology, which really is about digital literacy. And so think about, you know, what good is this, a smartphone or a laptop, if you don't know how to send an electronic file or an electronic signature to apply for a small business loan, or queue in a virtual line to keep yourself and your family safe. So high levels of digital literacy is part of what we need for a ready workforce. And it's imperative as a lifelong learning tool today. So the Hispanic Collaborative, working with our partners at Mexican Fiesta and at WIBIC, and sponsored by our friends over at Advocate Aurora Health, as well as the Small Business Development Center, we launched Mercado MKE, which is an online platform for Latino-owned businesses to get online, to connect with customers, and to increase their sales during the pandemic. We have about 50 businesses. It really just went live about a month and a half ago. We have about 50 businesses live today, with about another 30 in the process of onboarding. There are new businesses on there every day. We encourage you to check it out. We know that 60% of our small businesses don't have a website, and about another 85 don't have e-commerce capabilities. So we hope Mercado MKE changes those statistics and helps get more businesses online and embracing digital communications and this additional sales channel. So I hope I'm planting a seed with many of you right now. You know, Mexican food might be sounding really good for dinner, but we hope that you and your businesses will order some great takeout. Take a look at some of the businesses and offerings. I actually had somebody at my house today giving me a quote for some painting. Think about that, and let's support our small businesses, because they really need it.
And I just want to thank, Danae and Nancy, just the way you push so hard for our communities. And you're always on target with the needs and thinking of different ways that we can really turn that needle and make a difference and impact. So I just wanted to say thank you both. So, okay, Dr. Mone or President Martin?
Vicki, go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Mark. I know you had your finger up first, so go ahead.
Oh, I'll just mention a couple things really quickly. First, some data. There's recent research that shows the effect of the pandemic has just really turned the world even more challenging for low-income, disadvantaged students and students of color. We see these effects very acutely. For income levels less than $75,000, we see that students are 3 times less likely to continue or even attend college whatsoever. That's for 2-year and 4-year colleges. It's really concerning compared to incomes above that and especially at higher levels. So that's concerning. And then we've also recently seen the data on college students' mental health, and it's very, very concerning. So when you talk about disparities, what we see in that data is there are students, the more diverse students are the ones that are most acutely affected. They do not have a lot of the social support systems, do not have some of the networks. And so what our campuses have done, and I'm so proud of our partnerships with MATC in particular, there's such an important pipeline for this region, an important pipeline for UWM. And so working with Dr. Martin, who's a dear friend and incredible leader, we've developed a number of things that we can talk about in terms of moonshot. But when we play off of what Nancy talked about and we think about technology, it is, in fact, it's not just a binary yes or no. It's how we use it, how we deploy it. So specifically, we can provide students more invasive advising. We can reach out to students' use of technology. We've partnered with Education Advisory Board. We're the first region in the country when other regions said, oh, the pandemic has challenged us in significant ways. We have to focus on other things. We said it's never been more important than to focus on the needs of our region, in particular across the equity divide that we have, given that we serve so many students. We're the largest, UWM is the largest 4-year institution in terms of serving students of color. MAT is the largest 2-year institution serving students of color in the state of Wisconsin. This is not just in Milwaukee, this is substantial. So there's a lot on us and we have to do better. And so we've been taking on initiatives to access better mental health resources, better technology for advising, for continuity and retention. There's many other things we're doing in terms of distributing federal funding and using portions of the institutional dollars for that and many other things. And I know Vicki will build on that really well.
Well, Ray, you took actually a number of mine, but I'll just add a few more just very briefly. Working with our Second Chance Pell, we were one of the first in the nation and the first in the state in terms of a 2-year to really see how important it was to reach to the incarcerated. But what that also did for us is it expanded our technology, which we call connected classrooms, where we could actually in a classroom, for example, in our Calculus 3, we had students from a high school coming in. We had our own students from MATC, and then we had actually a couple of inmates from the different prisons from around the state in that same classroom being able to converse with each other and the instructor. So that has helped us to expand and to think about more opportunities for our students and more choices, especially with childcare issues, work issues and all of that they can catch up on their education if they need to. In terms of, Mark already mentioned mental health, but I'll talk about the physical health. We were with a partnership with Freighter and the Medical College of Wisconsin. We provided free virtual healthcare options at no cost to our students. And then in terms of vaccines, also Medical College. So thank you, Dr. Raymond, and your folks at the Medical College for helping with vaccines for our students and our staff and our faculty. And UWM also reached out to us for the vaccines. And so we're very, very appreciative of that. So those are just a few things that I'll mention.
And I just want to comment for both of you, Chancellor Mone and President Martin, just in terms of the collaboration that I've watched you two involve yourself in your leadership through HERA, the higher education, which hopefully we'll get a chance to talk a little bit more about that. But then also your connection with MPS, because that's a true pipeline initiative. And I think the more that you push, more of our students will really be able to benefit. So thank you for that work that you're doing there too. So let's talk a little bit about our community and about the GMC membership, you four. What would you say that we need to do to encourage access to education and college completion as a resource for improving equity within our region? What should, now in this particular case, GMC really be doing more of and can do more of? Dr. Mone.
Let's go with Dr. Martin first this time.
Oh, okay.
When we look at our partnerships with employers, it's so important to think about upskilling our workforce because we do see a declining enrollment, especially with the demographics for high school students. We still care about those students, of course, and so we're reaching out. We continue to do that through youth apprenticeships. So opening up your company to young people is really important, but also all those internships that we really need for our students to really help them to understand what the world of work in that particular career field looks like is really important for us. We are looking at badges, and I'm kind of getting into, Mark, a little bit of HERA, but we're looking at badges, pathways, tuition reimbursement programs are really important, scholarships for our students, and co-op programs where they're learning and earning at exactly the same time. Right now, we have what's called a career hub on our campus, and we can really position ourselves through the next decade to really have greater equity, opportunity, and economic strength, because those internships play such a crucial role to help our young students and our adult students who are maybe working in a different field, who want to come back and work in something completely different. And so they don't have the experience. So giving them those internships are really critical. The other thing I'd say is some companies prevent associate degree students from gaining those internships. And I'd like to tell you that it's a pathway. If you want them to go on to a 4-year degree, it's a great way to get them started in your company, just to mentor them, to support them, and then help them to get on to the 4-year college. And we have all of our advisors who can help with that as well. We did launch a university center right on our campus where we can actually take our students from that 2-year to the 4-year degree. We have faculty who will be on campus, different 4-year institutions. I know UWM is going to certainly be one of them. We have Lakeland starting with us already for a lot of our business students. So a lot of things like that. The Promise program, which for us has been a game changer for access for so many students. When we did the adult Promise, it was specifically designed to address those students who had some college but did not complete their degree. And it's been a great success. And those scholarship dollars and that support that we get really helps those students. And believe me, when adults come back, they are ready to go. They tend to finish up very quickly. They want to get into the world of work and or transfer. We found that most of those students do end up transferring. So we have a lot of emergency funds. Many people don't realize that a flat tire, not being able to pay the rent can derail a student completely from completing college. So with that, Mark, I'll let you build on that as well.
Well, as Aaron Rodgers on Jeopardy would say, correct, right? It's boy, what she said. I mean, it's hard to beat what Vicki has said, but I'll put maybe a sharp point on a couple of things and really play off of what Governor Thompson has talked about. Governor Thompson really set the stage well for what I think GMC has been and can do more of. And I know that Julia at the Higher Ed Regional Alliance table has been absolutely essential, as well as, of course, Nancy and Danae. It's a pipeline, it's a partnership. And what really is happening and what we've recognized, not only in higher ed, but across so many in the community-based organizations, nobody can address the issues alone. This preceded the pandemic. The issues are absolutely exacerbated by what's going on in 2020 and 2021. We really need everybody to dig and dive into this. So I'm really glad to have this question. Absolutely, the partnerships that Dr. Martin pointed out, We have 18 institutions in this region, 2-year, 4-year, public and private. They're excellent. They're an incredible resource across this region, representing over 150,000 students. That's our future. That is absolutely our future, but we have to work better in terms of linkages with K-12, and that's not just MPS. There's a number of other feeder schools, but in that space, M-Cubed is a partnership with MPS, MATC, and UWM. That is really important from the pipeline from employment and education. They really work hand in hand. It's critical. The Higher Ed Regional Alliance, anything you can do to help in terms of working with our goal groups on the employer linkages for internships, for placement, for co-ops, for advising. There's a lot of ways you can get involved. Scholarships are another category of areas that are so important. Our students of color are in such financial situation that the costs of education today are absolutely critical, as we've seen the support from the state over the years decline. It's just essential for that. So support in those ways. Governor Thompson talked about the advocacy for a number of things, whether it's around the work that we're doing to expand our work in prisons or to expand the Promise program to help students that are low income continue. So those would be some of the things that I would sharpen to build on what Vicki has talked about.
Thank you. So today, many of us are connected to you through Milwaukee Succeeds. Any additional thoughts that you might have in terms of, continued support through GMC?
Yeah, I think, thank you, Eve. I would say that there's some, what do I want to say? I think the sooner that we can get to our young people with, as has been described, apprenticeships and internships, the better. I think dual enrollment programs that give college credit while in high school, adding to that a work experience would be like terrific. I think if our members of GMC can support making college free to those who need it the most, whether that's scholarships or I was searching for, there's an initiative that Gallup, it's Jim Clifton from Gallup is supporting, that basically has employers taking high school graduates and hiring them full-time, but also paying them, giving them full ride scholarships to complete their undergrad degrees while they're learning a particular career. I think there's what we need for our employers to be is in the game as soon as possible in bigger numbers than they're currently doing it. I remember when Dr. Driver was our superintendent of Milwaukee Public Schools, and she would talk about setting a goal for 250 internships for her students, and she was successful in recruiting way more than the 250, but she only got 50 employers slots committed. That cannot be how our business community and our employers support the efforts of our young people, not only entering college, but actually completing college. We've got to kind of put some skin in the game for them on the employer side, I guess is what I want to call it. So that's some of the things that we're advocating for as part of Milwaukee Succeeds and among our partners. These are the kinds of things that we know are best practice when we're serious about closing equity gaps. These young people can't afford the student debt, and they can't afford to not, many of them, and I'm talking Black and brown, can't afford to go to college and not make any money, because typically they are also supporting their families. So I think we've got to step forward, and the institutions can bear some of this, but I think that the employers need to partner with our institutions, again, starting with our middle schoolers at 8th grade Promise, Vicki, as an example, just to get our young people believing that this is a pathway for them to have not only jobs, but jobs that allow them to be successful in life.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And last but not least, Nancy, and then we'll go into 3 questions that we have in the chat.
Thanks, Eve. So for those of you that know me know that I am not an advocate that money is a solution to all problems. But if there ever was a problem that we could throw money at and improve outcomes, I do believe this is it. This needs to be part of the mix of the discussion today. So from 2000 to 2018, overall college enrollment dropped by 1.5 million students nationwide. everybody's heard about some of that and the challenges to higher ed these days. But in that same time, Hispanic enrollment grew by 800,000 students. So Hispanic college enrollment is growing. And we, even here in our region, are losing out on developing diverse talent because of gap funding needs that, quite frankly, we just need at a bigger scale that's available. Each of our universities could be serving additional qualified college-ready Latino students today if we were able to make the numbers work for them. And students are knocking on the door, but that gap funding isn't there to make the picture work for them. Those funds aren't sitting in our cash-strapped universities right now, and they aren't sitting in the bank accounts of our diverse student homes. So if we're serious about the discussion of closing the education gap, we need to come together and figure out a way to put more money into the pipeline to cover the gaps between what universities can provide and what households can pay.
Thank you, Nancy. So true. Okay, so let me get right to the questions. Corey Nettles, the relationship between the legislature and the system seems very strained. Some of us question whether the legislature is committed to maintaining and building on the system's success. Things like tuition freezes, bonding limitations, cash flow management, et cetera, impede the chancellor's ability to run their businesses. What can be done to improve this relationship and give the system leaders the flexibility they need to run their organizations in an increasingly competitive environment with shrinking student demand? Governor Thompson, I'm going to give that to you.
Thank you, Eve. Corey, you know what has to be done. It's got to be the business community reaching out to the legislators, taking them out to eat, coming up to Madison, talking to them, telephoning them, texting them, and telling them how important the university is. They've got to hear from you. They're going to hear from me. They're going to hear from Mark. They're going to hear from all the chancellors, but they don't really believe us. They think we got to. They don't really believe how serious the situation is out here. And the only way we can convince them is to have outside sources such as the business community. Greater Milwaukee Committee, if you just invited in the legislators in the greater Milwaukee area and had a lunch with them and told them how important the university was, that would go a long way. And I'd be more than happy to come over and meet with them, with you. And explain, you know, what we're doing, the direction we're going. We're going in a whole new direction. And the direction is there's just tremendous amount of students that want to get educated. Our campuses are wide open. We're opening up to our students. We're being much more open to the students and want the students to be involved in decision making. We got great chancellors. I don't think people realize. They know Mark because he's in the Milwaukee area, but Mark is one of 13, and Eve knows him. We have 13 outstanding chancellors. We got great university. We are also setting up our campuses to be a business hubs. We're putting out an RFP on each one of our campuses, asking joint ventures to come in and take a look at it. People got to know we're in this for a business. We're changing direction. We're making it much more centric oriented. We're solving problems, and we want to make sure that people recognize this is going to be great for Wisconsin and needed by Wisconsin.
Right, thank you. Let me go to another question from Andrea Lee. As an educator and mother of a Black son who at one time was interested in a career in education and was pretty systematically discouraged, I wonder if one or some of you could comment on the need and efforts to encourage students of color, especially men, to consider education as a career. I'm going to purposely start with Danae, given the initiative that they're working with through Milwaukee Succeeds.
And I do think that the Moonshot initiative that MATC, UWM, and I forget our other two.
Carthage and Parkside.
Thank you. Will be very, very instrumental because it addresses the welcoming environment and supports needed that have proven at institutions like Georgia State to actually eliminate racial disparities, particularly for Black youth, in terms of not only acceptance, but actually matriculation through college. So I think that that example that those 4 institutions are committed to doing will accelerate the addressing those kinds of things that discourage young people. And the word gets out. If your friends don't, or your family don't have good experiences, that kind of makes it clear that going to college is not for you. So I think the reputational issue gets addressed when you build a reputation for being a welcoming environment that is supportive of the needs of those young people.
Okay, well, we are at 1:25 p.m. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. John Kersey, please forgive me, but since you're part of Milwaukee Succeeds and you had a question about the 7th and 8th graders and touring the campus, we can talk about that later. So please accept that. So Greg, I'm turning it back over to you. Thank you again, panelists. Governor Thompson,
Thank you.
it is about collaboration and having individuals like you at the helm, but more than that, it is about all of us collaborating and being intentional to really changing and closing these equity gaps. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hall, for being so punctual. That was well done. Thank you, Governor Thompson, and all the panelists, as well as Dr. Raymond for another insightful GMC meeting. As mentioned in my opening remarks, sharing the innovations and illuminations learned through COVID are essential for supporting the GMC's mission and focus areas of economic prosperity, innovation, and talent, and vibrancy of place. We will send a video copy of this meeting via email later this week. Our next meeting is a specially scheduled meeting next week on April 19th. We've invited GMC members to share their feedback and experience with creating reopening plans for their businesses. We look forward. And I know we're talking around our offices trying to figure out how do we get reopened. It's a really important topic as we bring vibrancy of place back to our community by bringing people back to work. So we will see you on April 19th. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.